It started with a simple visit to an old friend's house, but when his mother said, "Close the window," I don't want the neighbors listening, I realized some words carry more than meaning, they carry feeling. Where are you watching this from? And tell me honestly, what did that line mean to you? It had been almost 15 years since I'd last stepped foot in that quiet neighborhood, the one where summer afternoons always smelled of pine and rain-soaked pavement. My old friend had long since moved out of town, but something in me, maybe nostalgia, maybe restlessness, had steered the car back there. When I parked by the gate, I half expected the house to feel smaller, but it didn't. The same low stone wall, the same white curtains fluttering behind the windows. The same warmth that once made this place feel alive. And then, she opened the door. Unhi. My friend's mother. Time had touched her, yes, faint lines at the corners of her eyes, silver threaded through dark hair, but it hadn't dulled her presence. If anything, it had deepened it. She looked at me with quiet surprise that turned almost immediately into a smile. The kind that starts in the eyes before it reaches the mouth. "Is that really you?" she said, voice soft but amused, like she was speaking to a memory she wasn't sure was real. I laughed, a little too nervously, and nodded. "It's been a while." The years between us vanished in an instant. She ushered me inside, apologizing for the clutter that didn't exist. The living room was almost exactly as I remembered, wooden floors polished to a soft shine, books neatly stacked by the window, a vase of half-wilted flowers that made the air smell faintly of lilies and sunlight. "Your friend's not here," she said, pouring tea without asking. "He's in Busan now, working, married, probably too busy to call." Her tone carried no bitterness, just a kind of practiced acceptance. The way people talk when they've learned to let time move without fighting it. We sat across from each other, the table between us scattered with old coasters and the faint ring marks of 100 shared conversations. The steam from the teacups curled lazily upward, drifting between us like something alive. "So what brings you here after all this time?" she asked. I hesitated, unsure of the real answer. I said something about work, travel, passing through the city, but even as I spoke, I knew it wasn't true. I wasn't here for errands or memories. I was here because something in me wanted to feel grounded again, and somehow, I'd remembered her house as the safest place in my youth. She nodded, like she understood without needing to. Her gaze softened, not motherly exactly, more like she was studying me as a person for the first time. Outside, the afternoon breeze lifted the curtains gently, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth. Inside, the silence felt comfortable, not empty, but full of everything that had been left unsaid for years. And in that moment, with the tea cooling between us and her laughter echoing faintly in my memory, I realized something simple and disarming. I wasn't just visiting an old friend's home. I was returning to a feeling I hadn't known I missed. The tea had gone warm by the time we started talking about real things. Not work. Not the weather. But life. The kind that leaves its fingerprints on you long after the moment has passed. She asked if I was still painting. I told her I hadn't in years. She looked disappointed, as though she'd expected me to say I still carried color somewhere inside me. Then, without prompting, she said she'd stopped playing the piano. The old upright still sat against the wall, untouched, a thin layer of dust catching the afternoon light. "It sounds strange now," she said quietly, eyes fixed on the teacup in her hands. "Even when I try to play something happy, it feels like the piano remembers." Her words hung in the air. The kind of confession that isn't really about music at all. I didn't interrupt. I just listened, because something about her voice carried years of practiced calm trying to hold back loneliness. And I wondered how many afternoons she'd spent here, alone in this house, with only the ticking clock for company. When she finally looked up, her expression softened into a faint smile. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk so much." "You didn't," I said. "You just said what most people don't." The corners of her lips trembled, not quite a smile, not quite sadness. She shifted in her seat, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. For a moment, our eyes met again, and I felt that quiet tension that only happens between two people who know they should look away but don't. She noticed it too. I saw it in the way she lowered her gaze, suddenly remembering her tea, her voice steadying. "You always had a way of listening," she said softly. "Even when you were younger. You never filled silence with noise." Her words disarmed me. No one had said something like that in a long time. The ceiling fan hummed faintly above us. The wind outside pushed against the curtains, letting sunlight move across her face in shifting patterns, gold, then shadow, then gold again. I thought of how much had changed since those days when I came here with her son, noisy afternoons, cheap snacks, video games. I remembered her moving quietly around the kitchen back then, never intruding, but always there, a steady calm in the background of our chaos. Now, all that calm was in front of me. Older. Softer. But still carrying the same warmth. "You must be doing well," I said finally, though it came out more like a question. She exhaled a light laugh. "Doing? Yes. Well? I'm not sure anymore." And in that fragile honesty, something shifted between us, something neither of us named. Outside, the sunlight faded to the pale amber of early evening. Inside, her voice grew gentler, slower. And with every passing minute, the air between us thickened, not with romance, not yet, but with the quiet recognition that two people, once separated by time and role, were beginning to truly see each other. By late afternoon, the warmth inside the room had grown heavy, that kind of stillness that makes even the air feel like it's waiting for something. The tea had gone cold, but neither of us cared enough to refill it. We just sat there, talking in pieces. About small things. About nothing, really. Yet somehow, every word seemed to matter more than it should. Outside, a faint breeze drifted through the open window, brushing the sheer curtains like fingertips across skin. It carried the scent of summer, a mix of cut grass, rain-soaked earth, and the faint sweetness of the flowers blooming near the gate. Every now and then, her hair lifted slightly in the wind, catching the light like something delicate and alive. She noticed me watching and smiled, almost teasingly. "It feels good, doesn't it? The air." "It does," I said, leaning back. "You can't get this kind of quiet in the city." Her smile lingered, a soft, private curve. "I like it open like this. Makes the house feel less lonely." For a moment neither of us spoke. The breeze kept moving through, gentle and rhythmic, stirring the curtains in slow, graceful motions. I could hear faint laughter somewhere outside, neighbors talking, a radio playing a pop song half a block away. Then, her voice changed. Quieter. More careful. "Close the window," she said softly. "I don't want the neighbors listening." The words weren't scolding. They carried something else, not fear, but awareness. As if she suddenly remembered that silence, too, can be heard when shared between two people alone. I stood, reaching for the handle. The metal felt warm beneath my fingers. When the window clicked shut, the room exhaled, or maybe that was me. The outside world faded instantly, replaced by a soft, contained stillness. It was strange how quickly everything changed. Just seconds ago, the space had felt open, harmless. But now, with the window closed and the sunlight filtering through the fabric, it felt smaller, more intimate, as if we'd trapped something fragile between us. She looked up, meeting my eyes briefly before looking away again. "I just don't like people talking," she said. But her tone wasn't about gossip. It was about privacy, about wanting this moment to belong to no one else. I sat back down. The air was still now, and every sound, the creak of the chair, the soft slide of her fingertips on the teacup, felt louder. For the first time that day, I didn't know what to say. And yet silence said enough. She adjusted the sleeve of her blouse, her movements careful, deliberate, like she needed something to do with her hands. I watched the faint shimmer of light on her wrist, the soft rhythm of her breath. That's when I realized, this wasn't the same house I'd known as a boy. And she wasn't just my friend's mother anymore. Something in the air had shifted, subtle, invisible, but undeniably real. And behind that closed window, with no one left to listen, the distance between us began to quietly disappear. Evening settled slowly over the house, stretching the light into soft amber shadows that slid across the floor. The open warmth of day had faded, leaving behind that hushed stillness that always comes before night, when words feel heavier and time itself seems to breathe slower. Eunhee had changed positions, sitting sideways on the couch now, her legs tucked slightly beneath her. The way she moved carried that quiet grace of someone who doesn't try to be seen but somehow always is. Her voice, when she spoke again, was low, more to herself than to me. "It's strange," she said, stirring the tea she hadn't touched in half an hour. "You spend your whole life taking care of people, your husband, your son, the house, and then one day, you realize you don't know what to do with the silence that's left." The sound of the spoon against the cup was soft, rhythmic. I watched the ripples settle in the tea before answering. "I think silence only feels heavy when there's no one to share it with," I said. She looked at me then, really looked, her eyes reflecting the last traces of daylight. "And what do you do with it?" she asked. "I listen to it," I said after a pause. "Sometimes it tells you what you've been trying not to hear." A faint, understanding smile curved her lips. "You always had that kind of answer," she murmured. Thoughtful. A little sad. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. We just sat there, the quiet stretching between us. Not uncomfortable, just full. The kind of silence that said more than conversation ever could. Outside, the cicadas had started their evening song. Inside, the room glowed faintly gold from a single lamp in the corner. I could see the soft outline of her face, her hair falling loosely against her cheek. She looked peaceful, yet there was something fragile there too, something she didn't often let anyone see. When she spoke again, her voice wavered slightly. "Sometimes I think people forget that loneliness isn't always loud. Sometimes it just hums quietly in the background. Like a fridge or a clock." I nodded, feeling a knot form somewhere deep in my chest. "And sometimes," I said softly, "you don't notice it's gone until someone walks into the room." She didn't answer. Instead, her hand reached across the small table, almost unconsciously, brushing against mine as she reached for her cup. Her skin was warm. The touch lasted only a second, maybe two. But it lingered far longer in the air between us. Neither of us pulled away too quickly. Either of us spoke. And in that fragile stillness, I realized something simple and disarming. The distance between comfort and connection is thinner than anyone admits. And in that quiet house, with the windows closed and the world outside fading into darkness, we were both standing right on that line. I didn't sleep much that night. Even after leaving her house, her voice stayed with me, the rhythm of it, the pauses, the way she looked down after our hands brushed, as if the world might see what even we hadn't fully named. The drive home was quiet. The city lights blurred through the windshield, rain beginning to fall in thin silver lines. I kept thinking about how small the distance had been between us, a few inches, a single breath, and how that space had felt louder than any confession. When I woke the next morning, I told myself it was nothing. Just conversation. Just nostalgia twisted by quiet and memory. But when her message appeared around noon, "Thank you for yesterday. It was nice talking again," I found myself reading it more times than I should have. No emoji. No hidden meaning. Just words. And yet I felt something in them, a warmth that didn't belong to friendship. I waited hours before replying. "It was good seeing you too." That was all. Polite. Careful. Safe. But safe words don't quiet unsafe thoughts. 2 days later, I found myself near her neighborhood again, a coincidence I didn't fully believe. I'd brought a box of old books her son had left at my place years ago. A simple reason to knock on her door. A reason that didn't sound like missing her. When she opened it, her surprise was genuine. "You didn't have to bring these," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I was nearby." I lied easily. The lie didn't matter. What mattered was the way her expression softened, not out of politeness, but gratitude. She stepped aside to let me in. The house smelled faintly of soap and brewed coffee. The same quiet warmth I'd missed. We didn't talk much this time. The words came slower, thinner. It was as though both of us were pretending not to feel the careful distance we placed between ourselves. When I mentioned leaving soon for work, she nodded, her eyes lowering. "That's good," she said. "You have your own life to get back to." Something in her tone caught me, gentle, but edged with something like disappointment. "I suppose we both do," I said. The silence that followed was long, almost tender. Neither of us wanted to fill it. Outside, the morning sun filtered through the curtains, painting the table in pale gold. Her hands rested quietly around her cup, fingers unmoving. There was a sadness there, not dramatic, not spoken, just a quiet acknowledgement of something both of us understood. This couldn't go anywhere. And yet, as I stood to leave, her voice stopped me. "You're always welcome here," she said softly. "Even if you're just passing by." I nodded, meeting her gaze. "I know." But as I walked out the door, I realized that passing by was the last thing I wanted to do. The rain started without warning, the kind that doesn't announce itself with thunder or wind, just soft, steady drops that blur the edges of everything. By the time I reached her street, dusk had already swallowed the sky. The air shimmered with that familiar petrichor scent, wet earth, distant lilac, and something faintly metallic from the rooftops. I hadn't planned to see her again so soon. That much, I told myself. But when the first drops began to fall and the wipers struggled against the downpour, I realized where I was, already near her gate. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was something else entirely. She opened the door before I even knocked, a cardigan wrapped around her shoulders, surprise flickering across her face before softening into a smile. "You're going to get soaked," she said. "Come in." The lights flickered once, then went out completely. A small power cut. The rain had gotten heavier. She laughed, shaking her head. "Of course. It always happens when I'm alone." She found a few candles, setting them on the table. The soft glow filled the room, wrapping it in gold and shadow. The rain outside sounded closer now, almost intimate, a steady rhythm against the windowpane, like a heartbeat neither of us could ignore. We sat across from each other, the silence thick but not uncomfortable. The candlelight made everything feel softer, her eyes, her voice, the lines of her face. "It's strange," she said after a while. "How the house feels different when it rains. Quieter. Like it's listening." I smiled faintly. "Maybe it's waiting for something to be said." Her gaze held mine, steady this time. "And what is it that you're not saying?" The question hit deeper than she intended. I could feel the warmth of the candle between us, see the faint flicker of its reflection in her eyes. There was no judgment there, just curiosity, the kind that feels dangerously close to care. "I'm not sure I should say it," I admitted. "Then don't," she said softly, her tone gentler now. "Some things are better felt than said." The rain grew louder, drumming steadily against the glass. She reached forward, adjusting one of the candles that had started to tilt. Her fingers brushed mine, brief but deliberate this time. I didn't move. Neither did she. For a long moment, we just sat there, close enough to feel each other's breath but far enough to know what that space meant. The flicker of the flame cast shifting light across her face, highlighting the curve of her cheek, the calm in her expression. When she finally spoke again, it was barely above a whisper. "It feels like we're hiding from the world." I nodded slowly. "Maybe we are." She reached out, not to hold, not to draw me closer, but to touch my face lightly, her thumb resting just below my cheekbone. Her touch was warm, careful, almost trembling. Then, as if realizing the weight of it, she withdrew her hand and looked away. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady, patient, endless. Inside, the silence that followed felt like an answer neither of us could say aloud. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the world still felt washed clean, softer, quieter, like everything had been reset overnight. The sky was a muted gray, the air heavy with the scent of wet leaves and coffee drifting from somewhere down the street. I hadn't meant to stay so late the night before. One conversation became another, and time had slipped past unnoticed. She'd insisted I take the guest room rather than drive home through the storm. I'd agreed, telling myself it was practical, safer. But the truth sat heavier than that. When I woke, sunlight was peeking through the curtains, gold dust in the air. The house was still. I could hear faint movement in the kitchen, the soft clink of cups, the low hum of her voice as she spoke to herself, maybe humming an old tune. It felt domestic, peaceful, dangerous in its comfort. I found her by the window, pouring coffee into 2 small cups. Her hair was tied loosely, falling over one shoulder. She wasn't wearing the cardigan from last night, just a simple cream blouse that caught the morning light in a way that made her seem almost untouchable. "You're awake," she said, smiling gently. "I was just about to wake you. You slept well?" I nodded, accepting the cup she handed me. "Too well, I think." We stood by the window, side by side, watching the world outside come back to life. A few birds on the wire, a bicycle passing through puddles, the sound of water dripping from the eaves. Ordinary things, but in that moment, they felt impossibly vivid. Neither of us spoke for a while. There was no need. The silence had changed between us, no longer uncertain, just full of quiet understanding. She broke it first, her voice calm but carrying something beneath it. "It's strange," she said, "how easy it is to forget time with someone who understands silence." I smiled faintly, not trusting my words. "Maybe that's the only kind of time that really matters." She looked down, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. Then, after a pause, she said it, soft, almost to herself. "You've reminded me what it feels like to be seen again." I wanted to answer, but nothing felt enough. So instead, I reached out and gently covered her hand with mine. Just a moment, no more. Her skin was warm, familiar. She didn't pull away. When I finally spoke, my voice came out quieter than I expected. "And you've reminded me how gentle love can be." For a long second, we just stood there, 2 people suspended in a space that wasn't quite past, wasn't quite future. Then she exhaled, her fingers tightening just slightly before slipping away. She smiled, the kind that carries both gratitude and goodbye. "Take care of yourself," she said. "And don't forget to live a little." I nodded, stepping back, memorizing the way the morning light framed her, the quiet curve of peace around her eyes. As I walked toward the door, she didn't follow. She just stayed there, by the window, watching. And when I glanced back one last time, she lifted her cup slightly, a small, silent gesture, before turning toward the sunlight. Outside, the air felt new. The street glistened from the rain. And though I left her house that morning, a part of me stayed behind, in the quiet, in the warmth, in the space between her words and the silence that followed. It wasn't a goodbye. Not really. Just a pause, between 2 lives that had, for a moment, truly met. If that moment stayed with you, if it made you feel something quiet but real, tell me in the comments what part spoke to you most. And while you're there, let me know where in the world you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe for more slow burn stories, where love isn't rushed, it's remembered.